I've always had a goal to hit 1,000 likes on a video, but you legends smashed past that and got one of my videos to over 2K likes. Let's break even more records on this video. Please smash that like button. And I want to try this one thing. I want to know who my devoted listeners are. So once you've done that, comment down below that you hit that like button hard, or even a kind message. Let's see who our loyal devoted viewers are. You know who you are. Once again, thank you guys so much. Now to these amazing stories.
I didn't even want to go out that day. Not because I wasn't into her. I was, but something just felt weird when I woke up. One of those mornings where everything's a little too quiet, like the day is holding its breath. But I pushed it aside. Jean had been texting me for a week, and we finally agreed to meet. It was just going to be a chill afternoon, nothing too serious. There's this park near the edge of town with a lake in the middle. You can rent little rowboats there, paddle around under the trees. It sounded simple. Safe, but it wasn't. Jean seemed normal. She showed up in this oversized hoodie, ripped jeans, sunglasses, even though the sky was gray. Kinda awkward at first, but not in a bad way. We got some coffee from the little stand near the lake and walked around for a bit. She didn't talk much, but when she did, she laughed at dumb stuff I said, so I figured it was going well. Then we reached the boat rental. I hadn't been on one of those little boats since I was a kid. They're not exactly high-end wooden benches, peeling paint, the kind of thing that creaks when you sit down. But it was cheap, and she actually seemed excited about it. So we paid, climbed in, and pushed off. It started off fine. I rowed us out into the middle while she pointed at ducks and told me random facts about lakes. It was windy, and I had to fight the current a bit, but it wasn't a big deal. The lake's not that big. You can see the shore from every side. Trees hang low over the water, kind of beautiful in that postcard nobody sends anymore kind of way. Then the mood shifted. I couldn't even tell you when exactly. Jean stopped talking, which I didn't think was strange at first, but then I noticed she was staring at the water. Like, not just looking at it, really staring. Her whole body had gone still, and I thought maybe she was cold or something. So I asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. I stopped rowing for a second, just drifting in the middle of the lake. I looked at her again. Her lips were moving barely, like she was whispering to herself. It freaked me out. She was mouthing something, over and over, eyes locked on the dark water next to the boat. I didn't know what to say. I tried to joke, tried to lighten the mood. Nothing, she kept whispering. That's when the boat tipped. I don't even know how. 1 second we were floating. The next the boat jerked hard to the left. I fell sideways, smashed my shoulder on the bench, and suddenly I was underwater. Cold hit me like a punch. I kicked up fast, gasping, coughing, spinning around to find her. She wasn't beside me. She wasn't even trying to swim. Jean was sinking. Her arms were stretched out like she was reaching for something below her. Her hair floated around her face and her eyes were open. No struggle. No panic. She just stared downward like she saw something underneath us and wanted it more than air. I swam toward her, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled. She was heavy. Not dead weight, just resisting, almost like she didn't want to come back up. I dragged her to the surface, still coughing, choking on lake water. She started to fight me then, weakly pushing my arm off, muttering something I couldn't understand. Her eyes were wild, unfocused. We were still far from the shore, and the boat had drifted upside down a few feet away. I wrapped one arm around her chest and kicked hard, trying to get us both to the boat. Every few seconds she'd twist in my grip, whispering something sharp and fast that I couldn't make out. My lungs were burning. She wasn't helping. It felt like we were going to drown. Somehow I made it to the edge of the overturned boat. I grabbed the side and hauled her halfway onto it. She coughed once, hard, and then went limp. For a few seconds I thought she'd passed out. Then she looked at me, and I'll never forget her face. It was like she didn't recognize me, like she wasn't even sure where she was. A guy in another boat must have seen what happened, because 10 minutes later we were pulled out by park staff. They called an ambulance. Jean didn't say a word the whole time. She sat on the grass, dripping wet, shivering, staring back at the lake like she'd left something important out there. I rode with her to the hospital, mostly out of guilt. I felt responsible. We didn't talk. The nurses asked if she had epilepsy or anything like that, and I didn't know what to tell them. I said she just sort of froze. They ran some tests. Nothing came back abnormal. When her parents came to pick her up, she didn't even look at me, just walked out with them like I was never there. I waited for a message, something, but she never reached out. I didn't either. I didn't want to know. I haven't been back to that park since. Every once in a while I dream about that moment, the way the boat tipped for no reason, the way she sank without trying to swim, like something had pulled her down, and the way she looked when I dragged her back up, like I interrupted something. That was 6 months ago. I don't even know where she is now. I deleted her number, unfollowed everything. And even though nothing technically happened, I can't stop thinking about it. It wasn't just a bad date. It was something else. Something I don't have a name for. Something that makes my stomach knot up every time I hear water slapping against wood. I haven't gone on a date since. I tell people I'm busy or not interested. But the truth is, I'm just not sure what I'd do if I saw that same look in someone else's eyes. I don't even know how to start this without sounding dramatic, but I swear this actually happened, and it still messes with me when I think about it too long. It started off super normal, like painfully average. I met this guy John, this app my cousin told me to try. I wasn't even taking it seriously. I was mostly swiping out of boredom. But he didn't seem like a creep. He was kind of quiet but funny in this dry way, and we had this long convo about old cartoons, so I figured why not. We messaged for about a week before he asked if I wanted to hang out. He didn't push it or anything. Just said he had a cool setup at his place for movies and that he was making pasta or something. Said I could come by for dinner and chill. I hesitated for a second, just because going to a guy's house on the first meetup is sketchy, but he seemed really normal. No weird texts, no red flags. He sent me a voice note the night before, and he sounded kind of shy, honestly. So I said sure. My friend told me to drop my location and text her if anything felt off, which I did because we always say that to each other even though we barely follow through half the time. But this time I actually did it. I had this little feeling in my gut, not full on dread or anything, just like, don't be dumb. I got to his place around 7. It was this weird little townhouse on the edge of the city, like not totally in the suburbs, but not really close to anything fun either, kind of out of the way. The houses were squished together like they were copy and pasted, and his street was weirdly empty for a Friday. Barely any lights on in the windows, barely any sound except the hum of his porch light when I walked up. He answered the door real fast like he was standing there waiting. He smiled but didn't say much, just let me in. The inside was clean, like too clean. Not in a cozy way, more like a rental that no one's really lived in. Everything was either black or gray, and the lights were those cold, white LED ones that make everything look kind of dead. I tried to ignore it. I sat down on his couch while he finished cooking, and he had some movie playing low in the background, something with no dialogue, just static and weird music. Dinner was fine. He didn't eat much. He mostly watched me. I told myself he was just awkward. Some people are like that. He talked more after we ate. Told me random facts about serial killers which he thought were fascinating. I laughed awkwardly because I didn't know how else to react, and I kept checking the time like I had plans later even though I didn't. After about an hour I stood up and said I should probably head out. His face changed a little. Not a full-on mood swing or anything, just this slight shift. His smile stayed but his eyes didn't match anymore. He asked why I was in a rush. I told him I wasn't, just that it was late and I had to be up early. He said it wasn't even that late and asked if I could stay and watch one more movie. I told him no, thanks, maybe another time. That's when he locked the front door. Like, not in an aggressive way. He just turned the deadbolt slowly while looking at me. I said I had to go and he told me to relax. I wasn't scared at first, just really uncomfortable. I asked him to unlock the door. He said he would in a second. He just wanted to talk more, that I was acting weird. I wasn't sure if he was joking or trying to be dramatic. I didn't want to overreact, but something about the way he stood between me and the door made my throat tighten. I took out my phone and texted my friend. I didn't even try to hide it. I just texted her my location again and told her to call me. While I was doing that, John sat back down like nothing was wrong and started scrolling through his TV. He said I was making things awkward. I didn't even answer. I was too focused on the buzzing in my chest. My friend called me like 30 seconds later. I picked up and talked loud, said she had to come get me because something happened. I made it sound urgent, hoping he'd get the point. He looked annoyed but didn't move. I told him again I had to go, and this time he stood up and walked to the door slowly. Then he said maybe it was best if I didn't come back if I was gonna be weird about it. I said fine. I didn't care. I just wanted out. When he finally unlocked the door, he didn't even look at me. I walked out without saying anything. My friend was already waiting in her car at the end of the street. I ran to it like a movie cliche, slammed the door behind me, and told her to drive. We didn't talk the whole ride back. I felt this weird buzzing in my legs like I'd been holding still for too long and finally moved. When I got home, I blocked him on everything. Deleted the app too. I didn't even tell my parents. What was I gonna say? That I went to a guy's house I barely knew and he didn't want to let me leave. That I had to call for backup just to get out of a basic first date. I didn't report it. He didn't touch me, didn't yell, didn't technically do anything illegal. But something about the whole thing felt wrong in this deep, cold way I still don't really know how to explain. It was like he wanted to see what I'd do, like it was a game to him. Every now and then, I'll see someone in a hoodie walking alone, or I'll hear that same creepy background music from whatever movie he had on, and my chest will tighten like I'm back in that weird gray house with no warmth, no sound, and no way out. And honestly, that's probably the worst part, that nothing really happened, but could have. And I'll never know how close it actually came to going somewhere darker. I matched with this girl named Hannah on a dating app in late February. It was right after I'd taken a few weeks off from dating, mostly because I'd gotten out of a messy breakup in December and wasn't really in the mood to deal with anyone new. But the holidays passed to January dragged on, and I figured I'd try putting myself out there again, or at least kill time chatting with strangers. Hannah was normal, or at least she came across that way. She'd have a few photos, nothing too flashy, and a bio that just said she liked hiking, sushi, and scary movies. The kind of vague stuff everybody writes. What stood out was how easy she was to talk to. She didn't try too hard, didn't play the usual game of waiting 3 hours to reply. There was a strange kind of comfort in the way she texted. Like we already knew each other, but I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe we just clicked. We talked for a few days and decided to meet the following Saturday. I picked this little cafe downtown that I'd been to a few times. Not fancy, but decent. I got there 10 minutes early and grabbed a table near the window. Hannah showed up right on time. I recognized her right away, but something felt off. She looked like her photos, but not exactly. Her hair was darker. Her makeup was heavy, like intentionally overdone in a way that almost made her look like someone else. And she was wearing these round glasses that didn't match her face at all. I brushed it off. People change up their look all the time, especially online. I stood up, said hi, and we sat down. Right from the start, the conversation felt weird. It wasn't awkward or anything. It was almost too smooth. She knew what I was going to say before I said it. She brought up things I liked that I didn't remember mentioning. I figured I probably had and just forgot. It happens, but it kept happening. She mentioned the exact way I take my coffee. She knew I hated olives. She brought up this old inside joke about how I used to think squirrels were secretly evil. That one made my stomach drop a little. I stared at her face harder than before, and something started clicking in my brain in a way I really didn't like. Her voice, her smile, the way she tapped her nails against the cup, the way she tilted her head when I spoke. I knew those things. I knew them too well. It was my ex. It had to be. She looked different, sure, but everything else, her laugh, the little phrases she used, even the way she sat with one leg crossed under the other, was identical. My ex Laura and I had broken up about 3 months before. It had been a weird relationship from the start, on and off. Too many arguments. She'd get jealous for no reason, go through my phone, even show up at my job, once accusing me of lying about where I had been the night before. I stayed longer than I should have, mainly because when things were good, they were really good. But once we finally ended it, I blocked her on everything. I didn't want to go back. And I definitely didn't want her anywhere near me. Not here she was, sitting across from me, wearing a wig, different makeup, different name. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to cause a scene in the middle of a cafe, but I also couldn't pretend I didn't recognize her anymore. I didn't say anything right away. I just asked if she wanted to take a walk, trying to keep things calm. We left the cafe and started walking down the street. It was one of those cloudy afternoons where the light feels flat and everything looks faded. I remember that because it added to the weird dreamlike feeling of the whole thing. I waited until we turned a corner and were away from the crowd before I stopped and asked who she really was. She smiled like she was expecting the question. She said I was smart for figuring it out and that she'd been waiting to see how long it would take. Then she said she just wanted to talk, that we never really got to end things properly, that she wanted to show me she'd changed. I didn't buy any of it. My heart was racing. I asked how she'd found me, and she admitted she made a new account with fake photos and used a friend's number to register. She said she didn't mean to lie. She just knew I wouldn't talk to her otherwise. I told her I had to go. She stepped in front of me, said she just wanted 5 more minutes. I kept walking. She followed me all the way to my car, wouldn't stop talking. I finally had to unlock the door, get in, and drive off while she was still yelling my name through the window. She messaged me later that night from a different number. Long paragraphs. Apologies mixed with guilt trips. I blocked it. A week later, I got a package in the mail with no return address. It was a hoodie I'd left at her apartment during the relationship, along with a framed photo of us and a note that said, "We looked good together." I moved to a different apartment 2 months later, changed my number, deleted the dating app for good. I've told a few friends about it, but even they had trouble believing me at first. The thing is, nothing actually happened in a legal sense. She didn't hurt me. She didn't break into my house. She didn't physically touch me. But the mental part of it, being tricked into going on a date with someone you thought was a stranger, only to realize it was the one person you were trying to escape, sticks with you. It's not a story I tell often. People think you're exaggerating or that you're just trying to make a bad breakup sound dramatic. But I swear it's true. And now, every time someone new messages me, I find myself wondering if it's her again. Just another fake profile. Another attempt to start over under a different name. I haven't been on a date since. Alright, so this happened a while back, but honestly, it still makes me laugh and cringe and maybe kind of freak out if I think about it too long. Like it didn't start out as some insane story. It was just a dumb date I agreed to because I was bored and tired of talking to the same 2 people every day. But by the time it ended, I swear I was questioning everything I knew about how far someone can take a fantasy. I met this guy named Danny through a friend's group chat. It wasn't even a dating app thing. Someone dropped his name and number saying he was funny and single, and I thought whatever could be something to do. We texted for a few days, and he was actually funny in a weird, sarcastic way. Not like fake internet funny, just like dry and kind of strange. I figured he was just quirky or whatever, nothing major. He kept referencing movies and comics and stuff, which I didn't care much about, but I just went with it. He asked me out on a Saturday. Didn't say much about what we were doing, just told me to meet him at this diner downtown around 6. Seemed normal. I wasn't expecting anything wild, just maybe burgers and a milkshake, and that awkward, "So what music do you like?" small talk. I got there a few minutes early and texted him, and he said he was already inside. So I walked in, and that's when it got weird. So he's sitting at this booth by the window, full Batman costume, like not a t-shirt or hoodie or some kind of themed thing. No, this was the whole thing. The cape, the weird sculpted chest, the boots, the cowl, the voice changer thing stuck to his throat, like full commitment. At first I thought maybe it was a prank, like maybe he lost a bet or this was some inside joke I didn't get. But he stood up all serious and said something in this deep fake voice and gestured for me to sit like it was totally normal. I kind of froze because the waitress was already looking at us like she wanted to quit, and this little kid in the corner booth pointed and laughed, which made Danny whip around like he was about to throw a batarang or whatever. I sat down slowly, half waiting for someone to yell, "Gotcha," or "You've been filmed." But nothing like that happened. He opened the menu like everything was fine. He kept the voice going through the whole dinner, called the fries fuel, asked if my drink was laced with fear toxin, stared out the window like he was expecting a crime to break out across the street. I tried to laugh a few times just to play along and not be rude, but deep down I was trying to figure out if this guy was just messing with me or if this was his actual personality. And the more I listened, the more convinced I became that he actually believed it. He started going into this whole thing about how Gotham, he meant the city we lived in, was getting worse. Talked about cleaning it up and how the criminals are getting smarter. I asked him what he did for work, and he just stared at me for like 10 seconds. then whispered that it was classified, which didn't answer anything, but whatever. Then it got worse. He pulled out this weird-looking phone and showed me what looked like surveillance footage. Not like real footage, just grainy black and white videos of alleyways and street corners, like he'd been walking around filming random stuff at night. He zoomed in on one clip and said something about tracking patterns and how he thought he'd spotted someone tagging the same brick wall for 2 weeks straight. I didn't even know how to respond to that. Like, cool, call the city. The whole time he kept calling me citizen. Never once used my name, not even nickname, just citizen. And when I tried to steer the conversation into something normal like movies or music or childhood stories, he just circled it back to crime and justice and the importance of staying alert. I tried to ask if he was into cosplay or if this was for a convention or something, and he straight up said, "This isn't cosplay. This is who I am now." And not in a dramatic way, like in a completely flat, serious tone. I excused myself to go to the bathroom and called my friend. Told her she needed to call me in 5 minutes with some fake emergency because I didn't know how to leave without offending this guy who might actually think he was patrolling the city in his spare time. She called exactly when I asked, and I answered like, "Oh no, really?" And he just nodded and stood up, said something about duty calls, and told me to stay safe out there. I left so fast I didn't even look back. I didn't even finish my food. I think I texted him later that night saying I didn't think we were a match, and he replied with understood. The mission comes first. And that was it. A few weeks later, I saw him again. Not in person, but someone posted a pic online of a guy in a Batman suit standing on top of a bus stop with a toy grappling hook, and I swear it was him. I didn't say anything, just kept scrolling. I don't know if he ever took the costume off. Maybe he still wears it. Maybe he goes to work like that. Maybe he doesn't even work. Maybe he walks around all night thinking he's keeping the peace while everyone else just thinks he's some street performer with commitment issues. Anyway, that was my date with Batman. Real cape, real voice, real delusion. 0-second date. Never again. Honestly, I wasn't expecting anything wild. It was a Thursday night, and I had tickets to a small comedy show downtown. It was one of those little basement clubs that always smelled like old beer and had chairs too close together, but the acts were usually good. I figured it would be something different for a first date. Not just dinner or drinks, something with energy, something to laugh at, something to break the ice. I met Freya a week earlier through Instagram, which already should have been a sign this might go weird. We had mutuals. She followed me first. I followed back. We exchanged a few DMs, and she seemed fun, like in a loud, chaotic way. She used a lot of voice notes and kept talking about how she never got embarrassed. That line stuck in my head later. So we met up outside the venue around 7. She looked just like her photos, maybe a bit more dressed up than I expected. Heels, full face of makeup, giant earrings. I wasn't judging, but the place we were going was cramped and sweaty and loud. Not really the type of place you'd expect someone to dress like they were about to walk a red carpet. But whatever. She seemed confident, smiling, laughing a lot. I thought it might be a fun night. We grabbed a couple drinks and went down into the venue. We got seats near the front, maybe third row. Honestly, not a great idea for a first date, but I wasn't thinking. She said she loved comedy shows and had even done open mic once. I just thought, cool, someone who can take a joke. I really believed that for the first 20 minutes or so. The opener came on. He was all right. A few chuckles. Then the main act came out, a guy I'd seen clips of online, pretty sharp. He had that sarcastic style where he sort of roasts the audience, but nothing too aggressive. People were into it. That's when things started going south. About 10 minutes into his set, Freya randomly shouted something out. It wasn't even heckling exactly, more like she just wanted to be part of the show. Like she thought this was an interactive thing. She yelled something about his shirt being too tight, like she was trying to be funny. The crowd kind of laughed, but in that awkward, "oh no, someone's doing that" way. The comedian smirked, pointed her out, and hit back with a quick line. It was honestly mild. Something about her being jealous of his confidence. People laughed. She smiled too, but it looked fake, tight. Then she shouted again, this time louder. Said his jokes were lazy or that he was just copying other comics. I don't remember the exact words, but it definitely changed the vibe. He stopped his set for a second, looked directly at her. Then he leaned into it. Started going in hard. Not brutal, but definitely sharp. Made a few digs about her outfit, asked why she was so angry on a Thursday night, made a joke about influencers needing constant attention. The crowd lost it. The laughter got louder with each punchline. It felt like the whole room had turned their attention on her. That's when she cracked. She tried to shout something else, like her voice shook. Her face went red. I thought she was mad at first, like she was going to yell back and double down. But instead, she just stopped. Her eyes got glossy. She looked at me, blinked really fast, and then started crying. Not loud sobbing. Just silent tears, smudged mascara, lips pressed together. And the worst part, the comedian didn't realize at first. He made one more joke. Something about her being quiet now that the spotlight was on her. People laughed again. I felt frozen. I wanted to say something or grab her hand or get up and leave, but it all happened so fast. She stood up, mumbled something under her breath, and left. Just walked straight up the aisle and out the door. I followed her. Had to push past a few people. When I caught up to her outside, she was already on the phone with someone pacing in front of the building. I didn't hear what she was saying, but I could tell she didn't want me there. Her whole body was tense, arms crossed, not making eye contact. I asked if she was okay, and she just nodded without looking at me. Eventually, an Uber pulled up, and she got in without another word. I stood there for a while, still hearing the muffled noise of the show downstairs. People probably thought she was being dramatic, or maybe they didn't care. It's one of those situations where you don't know if you're supposed to feel bad or embarrassed or just completely confused. I texted her that night just to say sorry about how everything played out. She left it on read, never responded, never posted about it either. She just kind of disappeared off my feed after that. I've been to a few comedy shows since then, but I never sit near the front anymore, and I never bring a date to them. Not because I'm scared of someone crying again, but because I don't want to be part of someone's stand-up routine, especially when it's not even funny, especially when you can't tell where the jokes end and real stuff starts falling apart. That was my first and last date with Freya. This was supposed to be a normal-ish date. I mean, not fancy, but comfortable, a couple hours at the gym, a smoothie afterward, maybe some laughs. I met Sean through mutual friends, and he seemed chill, athletic, low drama. Who doesn't like someone who can work out? So I agreed to meet him at his gym on a Saturday morning. Gym dates are my thing. I'm not super into bars, and I figured this would be active and fun. I showed up in workout gear, shoes already laced up, ready to follow him into whatever routine he had planned. He greeted me at the door, headband around his forehead, muscles already warmed up. We walked inside, and he led me to his usual section, where the free weights and squat racks lived. He told me, well, he gestured, that we'd start with deadlifts. I didn't argue. I picked up a bar, went with the flow. For a while, things were fine. He taught me grips, corrected my stance, and we took turns lifting. I noticed he was pushing himself harder than normal, grabbing heavy, face red, but I assumed he was just showing off, trying to impress me. Fine. I didn't mind. I was impressed, honestly. Then came bench press. He loaded it up heavy, like ridiculously heavy. I asked if he wanted a spot, and he just shook his head and started. The weights clanged as he lowered the bar, focused and intense. After a couple of reps, he grunted hard, eyes squeezed shut, muscles locked. He kept going, pushing out one more rep, and then it happened. There was this sudden pause. I was halfway across the bench picking up a dumbbell, and I glanced back just as he stiffened. A weird look like he realized something was off. And then I saw it, a dark stain spreading across his shorts, low in the back like someone spilled coffee, but then realized it was way worse. I nearly dropped the dumbbell. Then, almost at the same moment, I smelled it. At first, I thought maybe somebody else had left something in the locker room, but then I realized it was him. He had pooped and peed himself, all in one heavy lift moment. He finished the rep, stood up, walked toward me with the barbell like nothing happened. Just walked. Smiled at me as if that was the plan all along. Like maybe he thought the stain was just chalk from the bar or water from his sweat. I couldn't think. My mouth went dry. I kept glancing at the stain. It was growing, dripping down, darker now. Sweat wouldn't do that. I tried to pretend I hadn't noticed, but my stomach twisted. He racked the barbell, took a towel, wiped his face, then wiped a little of the stain like he was just cleaning chalk or sweat. Then he walked me over to the leg press like we were moving on like this was normal. For a minute I wondered if I should say something like, "You might want to change or check what happened." But everything felt surreal. I felt locked in this weird horror comedy. Gym date, heavy lifts, bodily fluids, and acting like a regular Saturday just kept rolling. We continued the workout. He spotted me on shoulder presses. I couldn't focus. I felt creeped out. The smell was faint but persistent, like rotten milk mixed with gym socks. I thought I might get sick. Then he checked his phone, smiled, offered to buy post-workout smoothies. I didn't say no, I just nodded, still stuck. We walked out to the front desk to check out. He handed me his card and I tried to act normal while he paid. And he said something like, "Good workout, ba." And I managed a weak smile. I hoped he mentioned cleaning up, maybe swapping shorts or something, but he didn't. We left the gym and walked to a smoothie bar across the street. I told myself that if he changed, freshened up, everything would go back to normal. But no, he walked in, sat down, kept the same shorts, ordered a peanut butter banana smoothie, my favorite, actually, and I wanted to say run, but I didn't. We sat opposite each other. I sipped my strawberry mango, trying to think fast. He asked how I liked the gym. I nodded. I tried to steer the convo toward places we could go next weekend, like hiking or mini golf, fine date stuff. He replied as if nothing had happened. I thought maybe he was embarrassed and that was why he said nothing. I thought maybe he'd apologize later. At least I hoped so. After smoothies, I said I had forgotten an errand. He said he'd walk me to my car. I was relieved to be going home, just home, away from stains, smells, and surreal silence. He walked me across the street to where I'd parked. I said thanks. He smiled again like this was perfectly normal. I walked to my car, unlocked it, slid inside. As I shut the door, I could still smell it, like it had filled my clothes now too. I started the engine and left. That night, I texted him saying I had fun, but I felt we weren't a match. He replied with a thumbs up emoji and "stay strong." That was it. I never saw him again. I then added him on social media. I jumped into the shower and scrubbed for what felt like hours. I washed my hair twice, changed sheets 3 times. I even bleached my leggings. I felt violated by gym equipment, by the scent of muscle and mildew clinging to me. It's been months now. I haven't set foot in that gym since. Sometimes I dream I'm on a treadmill and the machines are coated in something sticky and brown. I wake up covered in sweat and guilt for not saying anything. I still love working out, but that Saturday ruined it in a weird way. When friends ask about my gym routine, I still say I took a break. I haven't gone back yet, because I'm not sure I can walk past that locker room without thinking about bodily fluids, false pretenses, and the guy who thought a broken body function didn't matter. I don't know if he's okay anymore. Maybe he had an undiagnosed health problem. Maybe he's still working out pretending nothing happened. I don't want to know. All I know is that first date was supposed to be fun, and it ended with stains, smells, confusion, and a lifetime of squick whenever I see barbells. I thought it was just going on a regular date. Meet a girl, grab some drinks, maybe get to know each other. Easy stuff. But this one, it was something else. Something I couldn't have predicted, not a million years. Her name was Chloe. We met through a dating app, nothing crazy, just a swipe right, a couple messages, and then a plan to meet up at this quiet little cafe downtown. I showed up on time, dressed like a normal person trying to make a good impression. I was nervous, yeah, but in a normal way. I wasn't expecting anything weird. I wasn't expecting to be thrown into some kind of weird interview situation. Right when I got there, Chloe was already waiting, cool and casual, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That should have been a hint. But what really caught me off guard was when 4 other girls walked in behind her, like 4, all wearing matching leather jackets, sitting down around the table, pulling out notebooks and pens like they were ready for business. I blinked, thinking maybe they were her friends, just coming to chill. But no, these girls weren't just there to hang out. They all turned to me at once, eyes sharp, like they were sizing me up. Chloe introduced me quickly, and then handed the floor over to her friends. One of them started firing questions right away. And I mean rapid fire. Where did I work? What were my hobbies? What was my favorite movie? What did I think about commitment? Did I like kids? What was my long-term plan in life? I answered, trying to keep it casual and friendly, but I could feel her eyes drilling into me, not letting me off easy. They weren't just curious, they were judging, taking notes, occasionally whispering to each other like I was some kind of case study. I tried to smile through it, but inside I was freaking out. Then Clover herself jumped in, asking more personal questions. Why did I want to date her? What did I think made me a good boyfriend? Had I ever been in a serious relationship? I answered honestly, but every time I looked at her, she had this smirk that made me doubt if she was even listening. About 5 minutes in, I realized I was failing. Not just failing at being charming or funny or whatever. I was failing at passing this weird test that I hadn't agreed to take. The girls exchanged glances. One of them flipped through her notebook and said something that made Chloe laugh quietly. I sat back, confused and more than a little humiliated. Then, out of nowhere, the girl who seemed like the leader, Chloe, got up, thanked me for coming, said they had to move on, and basically kicked me out of the chair. Before I could even stand, another guy walked in and took my spot at the table. The whole thing started again with the same questions, the same note-taking, the same judging looks. It hit me like a ton of bricks right then. This wasn't a date. It was an interview, like a bizarre casting call. Chloe was literally interviewing multiple guys at the same cafe, one after the other, sizing them up to pick a boyfriend. The whole thing felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How did I not see it coming? How did I end up in some twisted game where I was the auditioning contestant, and Chloe was a ruthless judge? And why was I okay with sitting there answering questions to a bunch of strangers like some desperate candidate? I stayed for a few minutes longer, watching the next guy nervously answer the same set of questions I'd just been grilled on. Chloe and her friends scribbled away, nodding and whispering. After a while, I quietly got up and left. Didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. On my way out, I caught Chloe's eyes. The smirk was back, like she was winning some twisted game. I walked home in a daze. My mind kept replaying everything. The notebooks, the questions, the cold way she dismissed me, the way she treated dating like a job interview where people were hired or fired in minutes. I'd never got a text or a call from Chloe again. Not that I wanted one. I had installed the dating app the next day and deleted her from every social media account I had. The whole thing felt fake and staged, like I had been some kind of test subject in a creepy experiment. Sometimes I wonder if the guys who came before me ever realized what was happening. Did they figure it out like I did? Did they get nervous or angry? Did any of them actually get picked? And if so, what kind of relationship does that even start? That first date was supposed to be something normal, something fun, but it turned into one of the weirdest, most disturbing things I've ever been through. Like being in a job interview where you're judged not just for your skills, but for how well you can pretend to be someone else. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even close. It was just a cold, calculated selection process that left me feeling like I was disposable, like some piece of data in a spreadsheet. And that's my story. The date that wasn't a date at all. Just a weird audition for a boyfriend nobody really wanted. I thought going on a date with Spencer would be chill. You know, just a regular night out to get to know someone new. I didn't expect it to turn into something I couldn't shake off for days. It started out normal enough. Spencer picked a casual little cafe that wasn't too loud, and I figured we'd just talk and maybe laugh a little. But somewhere along the way, things got weird, and not in a funny way. The thing about Spencer was he smiled a lot, like almost too much. And the smile was always there, even when he was saying stuff that felt off. At first, I didn't notice it, but then the comments started. Nothing major, but enough to make me wonder. It was like he was throwing little verbal jabs at me, all while grinning like it was a joke. But the way he said things wasn't exactly friendly. It began with my clothes. I showed up wearing a simple dress I thought looked nice. Spencer glanced over and said something about it being not really my style, but quickly added, "Just kidding." I laughed it off because who cares, right? People have preferences. But then he made a comment about my shoes, calling them kinda outdated, but with that same smile, like he wanted me to laugh, but also wanted to see if it'd sting. I could feel it, this weird tension growing. The night went on, and the subtle digs kept coming. He mocked my choice of drink, said it was too boring, then just messing right after, his grin never fading. He made fun of my jokes, saying they were predictable but funny enough. It was like every little thing I said or did was being quietly critiqued, and I started feeling myself shrink under his gaze. I kept telling myself to relax, that he was probably just awkward or didn't know how to talk to people. But it wasn't that. I caught him watching me closely whenever he threw out those low comments, like he was testing how I'd react. If I laughed, he'd push a bit harder next time. If I got quiet, he'd switch it up and pretend he was just teasing, acting like nothing was wrong. There was no warmth in it, no real connection. Just this strange back and forth where I was the target. At one point, I tried to steer the conversation somewhere safe, asking about his hobbies or what he liked to do. Instead of answering, he smirked and said something about my safe questions being boring, then followed it up with a quick "just kidding." That line kept coming like a sick game where he said something harsh, then covered it up so I wouldn't call him out. But the effect was the same. He was chipping away at me piece by piece. I remember looking around the cafe and noticing how normal everyone else seemed. Couples laughing, friends chatting, baristas calling out orders. And there I was, feeling smaller and smaller, trapped in this weird loop of being quietly put down, but never quite sure if I was imagining it. I didn't want to ruin the date or make a scene, so I kept trying to play along, trying to keep the smile on my own face. By the time dessert arrived, I felt drained. The light teasing wasn't light anymore. It felt calculated, like Spencer was trying to see how much he could get away with before I broke. I caught myself checking the clock more often, thinking about when I could just leave and get away from the whole thing. But every time I thought about leaving, he'd hit me with another low-key insult wrapped up in a grin, and I'd freeze, unsure if I should take it seriously or just laugh it off. The worst was when he started commenting on things I couldn't change, like my laugh, or the way I sometimes stumbled over my words when I got nervous. He'd say it wasn't exactly charming, but then add "just kidding, you're fine." And even though he said it was a joke, I could see the look in his eyes. He wasn't joking at all. He wanted me to feel exposed, uncomfortable. When the night finally ended, I felt like I'd been through some kind of test I didn't sign up for. Spencer walked me to my car, still with that weird smile, asking if I wanted to do it again sometime. I wanted to say no in every way possible, but didn't have the energy to explain. I just nodded and got in my car. Driving home, my head was spinning. The whole thing stuck with me, the way he smiled while cutting me down, how he carefully watched my reactions like I was part of some twisted experiment. It wasn't just awkward or uncomfortable. It felt cruel, like I was a piece on a board in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I still don't get why someone would do that on a date. Why treat someone like a target instead of a person? The way he pushed me with those little digs, always backing off just enough to pretend it was a joke, felt designed to break me down slowly. Like the date wasn't about getting to know each other, but about seeing how much I'd take before I cracked. I didn't text him again. I deleted his number and never went back to that cafe. It was supposed to be a night of getting to know someone new, but it turned into something I wanted to erase from my memory. And that's the worst part, how something that started so normal ended up being this quiet, disturbing kind of emotional torture. Not with screams or fights, but with smiles and words that cut deeper than anything else. I thought this date was gonna be simple. Just me and Barry grabbing dinner somewhere chill, maybe talking about music or movies, whatever. I wasn't expecting a blind double date, but that's exactly what I ended up with. It started normal enough, sitting across from her in this little dimly lit place she picked out, the kind of spot where you think you can just relax and maybe vibe with someone new. But then, out of nowhere, halfway through the meal, she drops this line about her friend who's single and how she'd love to meet someone like me. Right then, I should have known something was off. Before I even got a chance to react, Barry is texting this friend, setting something on the fly. I was sitting there, fork halfway to my mouth, watching her phone light up every few minutes, ignoring the conversation we had started. I'm pretty sure I blinked and the plan changed from a date with just us to some weird triple hangout I didn't sign up for. It was like she invited someone else into this bubble we had, and suddenly I was just a background character in my own date. It wasn't long before the friend showed up. I wasn't even sure if she was supposed to be joining or if this was some kind of test or joke. Barry barely introduced us and immediately went back to texting her friend, which honestly made me feel invisible. The restaurant noise blurred around me, and the two of them were off in their own world, leaving me stuck between feeling like a third wheel and trying not to look desperate. The whole night after that was kind of a blur, but not the good kind. Barry kept her phone glued to her hand, texting back and forth, sometimes laughing or making comments to her friend that didn't include me. I tried to jump back into the conversation, but it was like she had already checked out emotionally, and I was just there to fill a seat. The friend was okay, but the whole situation felt so staged, like I was part of some weird speed dating game where I didn't even know the rules. I kept thinking maybe this was some strategy Barry had, trying to see my reaction or testing how chill I'd be. But being ignored on a first date is a whole other level of uncomfortable. You're sitting there, eating dinner, but it's like you're invisible, like your words don't matter because the real attention is somewhere else. It wasn't just rude. It was this strange mix of loneliness and confusion, like I was both present and completely erased at the same time. The more I sat there, the more I realized I wasn't even on a date anymore. I was a prop in some weird setup where Barry was more interested in setting me up with someone else than actually getting to know me. I kept looking at my phone, scrolling through messages I didn't really care about, watching the clock, waiting for the night to end. Every time I thought it couldn't get worse, Barry would send another text or laugh at something on her screen, totally tuned out from me. At one point, I caught her looking at me with this smile that didn't reach her eyes, like she was enjoying the fact that I was stuck there. That's when it hit me how twisted the whole thing was. I wasn't there to be with Barry. I was just a placeholder while she tried to set up her friend, who honestly never looked like she cared either. The whole thing felt like a trap, where I was bait for something I didn't even know about. The night dragged on. Every time the waiter came by, I wanted to just tell him I was done, that I didn't want to be part of whatever game Barry was playing. But I stayed because I wasn't sure where else to go or how to get out without making it awkward. The friend finally left halfway through dessert without much of a goodbye, and I realized Barry wasn't going to stick around much longer either. When it was finally just me and Barry again, it was quiet. No apologies, no explanations. She just acted like everything was normal, like none of the weird setup had happened. I didn't have the energy to ask questions or call her out. I just paid my share and left, feeling like I'd been used as some kind of matchmaking tool without my consent. Walking home, I kept replaying the night. How I'd shown up expecting to maybe click with someone new, and instead got dragged into a weird blind date that wasn't even mine. The way Barry kept texting her friend, leaving me alone more than half the night, made me feel like I was nothing more than a backup plan. Not yet a backup plan, more like a test subject. It wasn't about me at all. It was about her friend, and I was just a stepping stone. The whole thing left me feeling gross, like I was bait for a trap I didn't see coming until it was too late. I kept wondering how anyone could treat a date like that, like a box to check or a pawn in some game. I didn't text Barry after that night. I deleted her number and avoided that restaurant. The worst part wasn't even the awkwardness or being ignored. It was realizing how easy it was for someone to pretend to care while using you for their own plan, like your time and feelings didn't matter at all. So yeah, that's the story. A first date that felt less like a chance to connect and more like a weird blind setup I never agreed to. It was disturbing how normal it all seemed at first, and how quickly it turned into something else. I've been on awkward dates before, but this one left me feeling small and forgotten in a way I didn't expect. I thought I knew what an awkward first date looked like. I mean, I expected some nervousness, maybe a few bad jokes or weird silences, but nothing could have prepared me for the night Imran invited his grandmother along. Like, seriously, who does that? I didn't need me a warning or a hint that this was gonna be some kind of family affair. I just showed up thinking it was going to be a regular dinner, maybe a chill evening with someone new. Instead, I walked into what felt more like a family intervention than a date. We met at this small, kind of trendy restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, but nice enough for a first date. Imran was early, looking calm and casual, so I thought, okay, this might actually go well. Then, out of nowhere, this older woman walks in behind him, dragging a chair like she owned the place. She had this stern look on her face, sharp eyes, and she sat down at the table without even asking me if it was okay. That's when things started getting weird. Right off the bat, the grandmother wasn't interested in being polite. She stared at me like I was some kind of test she had to pass, and the questions she fired at me weren't exactly welcoming. But what really shook me wasn't the questions. It was what she said next. The way she casually dropped that I wouldn't make a good wife or mother, like it was just a fact everyone knew, I was the only one blind to it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was supposed to be a date, right? not a judgment session from someone who barely knew me. Imran didn't seem to mind. He just smiled like it was all normal, like this was some weird family tradition or something. Every time his grandmother said something rude or snide, he just nodded or changed the subject quickly. I kept hoping it was some kind of test or joke, but it wasn't. She kept coming at me, digging into everything from my career to my family plans like she was some kind of harsh referee in a game I didn't know I was playing. It wasn't just the words either. The tone was cold and sharp, but she masked it with these fake smiles or little chuckles like she was trying to soften the blow. But trust me, it wasn't soft. She told me I was too independent, too focused on work, and that no man would want a woman like me because I wouldn't fit the traditional mold she had in mind. She even told me I'd never make a good mother, which felt like a punch straight to the gut. I kept trying to respond, but I was caught off guard every time. Imran just sat there, acting like none of it was happening. The whole dinner became this surreal nightmare where I was basically on trial. Every sip of water, every bite of food, felt like I was waiting for the next insult to land. I watched Imran more than I watched his grandmother. His face never changed. He didn't defend me or stop her. He didn't even glance at me like he cared what was happening. It was like he invited her to make me feel small and powerless, and then just let it happen. At some point, I stopped eating because the embarrassment was choking me more than the food ever could. Other tables were full of couples laughing and having a good time, but I was stuck here with two people who made me feel like I was completely wrong just for being myself. The grandmother even went as far as to say I wouldn't be able to keep a man happy because I had too much pride. It was so bizarre, like something out of a bad movie. I started thinking maybe this was some weird cultural thing, something I wasn't supposed to get because I wasn't part of their family or community, but that didn't make it hurt less. If anything, it made it worse because I realized how deep those ideas ran and how little respect they had for who I actually was. I wondered what kind of relationship Imran had with his grandmother and why he thought it was okay to bring that into a first date. Was this some kind of test for me, or was it just as normal? The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a trap. Imran never tried to stop her or even say anything in my defense. At one point, she even started comparing me to his ex-girlfriends, saying none of them were as unsuitable as I was. That was when I stopped pretending I could salvage the night. I just wanted to leave, but I didn't want to make a scene either. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet long enough, it would be over soon. The grandmother kept dominating the conversation like she was running the whole thing. She kept making comments about how real women behave and how I didn't fit that description. I realized I wasn't even being seen as a person anymore. I was just this project to be judged and rejected. It was exhausting, humiliating, and honestly kind of scary. I kept glancing at the door, hoping to find a way out without causing a scene. When the bill came, Imran still didn't look at me. He paid like nothing had happened, like the whole night was normal. I walked out feeling sick, like I'd been through some twisted trial instead of a date. On the way home, I couldn't stop replaying the words his grandmother said, how she tore me down piece by piece without even knowing me. I never heard from Imran again, and honestly, I didn't want to. The whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth, not because of him exactly, but because of how easily he let someone else insult me in his presence. It was disturbing how normal it all seemed to him, like this was just how things were supposed to go. For me, it was a reminder that some people bring their own battles and expectations into everything, even something as simple as a first date, and they don't care who gets hurt. That night wasn't just a bad date. It was a glimpse into a world where respect and kindness didn't exist, where people used family and tradition to tear others down. I still remember the way his grandmother looked at me like I was a failure waiting to happen. It's not something you forget easy. I thought I was just going out for a chill dinner with this girl, Millie. Nothing crazy, just two people trying to get to know each other over some food and maybe a few drinks. I didn't expect to walk into what felt like a full-on recruitment event disguised as a date. Like, at first, she mentioned her side hustle like it was no big deal. Something casual she was doing for fun or extra cash. But soon enough, it wasn't casual at all. The whole vibe switched, and I wasn't sure if I was there for a date or if I'd accidentally signed up for a business seminar. It was honestly one of the strangest and most uncomfortable nights I've had. We met as laid-back burger joined with a cool atmosphere, the kind of place where you think you can just relax and have a good time. Millie seemed normal enough, smiling, chatting about random stuff, asking about my job, hobbies, and that kind of thing. So when she brought up her side hustle early on, I figured, okay, people talk about what they're into, no big deal. She said it like it was some little thing she did to keep busy, maybe make some extra cash on the side. I thought she'd drop it after that, but nope, that was just the start. She kept going on about this business thing she was involved in, but the more she talked, the less it sounded like just a side hustle. It was clear she was into one of those multi-level marketing schemes. The words started coming out fast. Guaranteed success, just one meeting, freedom, and financial independence. She was all hyped up, like she truly believed she had found the secret to making easy money. At first, it was just little hints dropped here and there, like, you should totally join. It's not as hard as people think, or I can introduce you to some amazing people. I thought she was just joking or trying to be cute with the whole join my team thing. But the more she said it, the more I realized she was serious. By the time our burgers arrived, the whole date had shifted. Instead of talking about fun stuff or getting to know each other, Millie started explaining how the business worked in detail. She pulled out her phone and showed me pictures of fancy cars and trips she supposedly got from the company. She talked about how she made her first $5,000 and how all I had to do was come to one meeting, see for myself, and the rest would fall into place. She was so intense about it, almost like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. At that point, I was stuck in this weird place where I wasn't sure if I should laugh or run out the door. I kept trying to steer the conversation back to normal stuff, but she always found a way to twist it back to her business. Even when I mentioned something completely unrelated like movies or music, she somewhat connected to being an entrepreneur or building a team. It was exhausting and honestly a little scary how obsessed she seemed. The people around us were doing their thing, eating and chatting, but I was sitting there feeling like I was part of some sales pitch disguised as a date. The whole night felt like a trap where my time was being used as free advertising. I kept thinking, is this a test? Is she trying to see how much she can sell to me before I figure it out? Or was she just so caught up in this world that she didn't even realize how strange it was? What made it worse was how genuine she seemed about it all. She wasn't just trying to push me to buy something. It was like she honestly believed this was the way to fix everything. Her career, her life, maybe even her happiness. But in that moment, it felt like I was just a mark, someone to bring into the fold, and the date was just the first step in convincing me. She kept saying how we could succeed, how I had the potential to be great at it, and how it was all about mindset. It was a lot to take in for a first date. I remember the waitress bringing over our second round of drinks. I was trying to focus on anything else. I checked my phone a few times, hoping for some distraction or even an excuse to leave early, but Millie was relentless. She pulled up testimonials and videos from other people in the program, bragging about their success and freedom. It felt like I was trapped in a never-ending commercial. By the time dinner was over, I was half wishing I had never agreed to meet her. I didn't want to be rude or awkward, but I also couldn't wait to get out of there. She invited me to come to a meeting the next day, saying I'd see the light, and that it was just one meeting to change everything. I kept saying no in my head, but she didn't seem to hear it. Walking out of that place, the night air felt like a relief, even though I was stuck with this weird aftertaste of the whole thing. I kept thinking about how a date that was supposed to be about two people getting to know each other ended up feeling like a sales funnel I never signed up for. It was disturbing how quickly it went from normal to uncomfortable, and how one person's obsession can take over the entire night. I haven't heard from Millie since, and honestly, I hope I never do. That night wasn't just a bad date. It was a reminder that some people don't see dating as two people connecting, but as an opportunity to sub you on their world, no matter what you actually want. And it's a little scary how smooth they can make it feel until you realize you're just the next target. I didn't think a simple walk could turn into something so awful. Honestly, it started like any other date, pretty chill, nothing out of the ordinary. Dom seemed okay at first, funny enough, and I figured a walk in the park after dinner would be a nice way to end the night. But then, out of nowhere, something snapped. Not in my head, but in reality, right there on the pavement. We were just walking, talking about whatever random stuff people talk about when they're trying to make a good first impression. The street was quiet, the kind of place where you can actually hear birds even though you're in the middle of the city. Dom was joking around, the kind of goofy humor that feels harmless, until it wasn't. Then he suddenly reached out and tripped me. I mean, just a quick flick of his foot behind mine like it was some stupid joke. I didn't expect it, so I fell forward hard. The pavement was rough and unforgiving. I hit the ground face first and felt this sharp, burning pain in my nose. It was instant, like a sudden explosion of pain that made everything go blurry for a second. Blood started trickling down before I could even fully realize what had happened. I lay there stunned for a moment, everything spinning. I remember hearing his laugh, loud and careless, like it was a punchline to some joke only he found funny. I wanted to scream at him, to ask why he thought it was okay to do something so reckless, but I was stuck, confused, and hurting. The worst part wasn't just the fall, it was the way he reacted, like it was no big deal, like my pain was just part of his amusement. He didn't help me up or check if I was okay. Instead, he just laughed, like it was the funniest thing in the world. The walk we had planned felt like it ended in a split second, but the night stretched on forever in my head. I could barely stand up straight with the pain in my face, and I just wanted to get out of there. But Dom kept acting like everything was normal, like nothing had happened at all. It was so surreal, like I had stepped into some twisted version of a date where your safety doesn't matter. As I tried to steady myself, the pain in my nose kept getting worse. I could feel it swelling, throbbing under my skin. My vision was fuzzy, and the taste of blood was thick in my mouth. I knew I probably needed a doctor, but Dom didn't seem to care. He kept laughing, cracking jokes about how clumsy I was, like it was my fault for falling. It wasn't just the pain from the fall. It was the way he made me feel small and ridiculous in a moment when I should have felt safe. The weird thing is, before that moment, I thought he was just a bit awkward, maybe a little immature. But that joke, his reaction, it revealed something darker. I realized then that maybe the whole night wasn't about getting to know each other or having fun. Maybe for him, it was about control, testing boundaries in a way that was dangerous and cruel. I didn't say anything right away, partly because I was shocked and partly because I didn't know what to say. I felt trapped in this mess of pain and disbelief, trying to pretend I could still enjoy the night when all I wanted was to disappear. The streetlights above flickered as if they were mirroring how messed up the whole thing felt. The park benches we passed looked like they belonged in a completely different world, one where people respected each other, where falling down didn't turn into humiliation. Eventually, I managed to stand, even though every step felt like it was stabbing my nose. Dom didn't offer to help me or call for a taxi. He just followed, still grinning like he pulled off some prank. The air around us felt colder, heavier, and I couldn't wait to get away. That night, the pain in my nose kept me awake. I touched it carefully, feeling the sharp edges where the bone had broken. I couldn't believe how something so small, a stupid joke that went wrong, could change everything in a matter of seconds. I thought about calling someone to come pick me up, but part of me just wanted to get through it alone. I felt embarrassed, even though I knew it wasn't my fault. The next day at the hospital, they confirmed it was broken. I needed a few weeks off work to heal, and even then the swelling made me look like a different person. But what hurt more than the physical injury was how I replayed the night in my mind over and over, wondering if I had missed the signs, if I should have seen what kind of person Dom really was before it got that bad. It's wild how quickly things can change. One minute you're thinking you're just on a casual date, walking and talking, and the next you're on the ground with a broken nose and someone laughing like it's all a joke. That night wasn't just painful, it was disturbing. It showed me that some people's idea of fun is twisted and dangerous, and that sometimes the person you think you're getting to know can surprise you in the worst way possible. I haven't seen Dom since. He never apologized or checked in. I don't even think he saw what he did as serious. But for me, it was a moment I can't forget, a line crossed that turned a night I hoped would be nice into something I wanted to erase. It was a reminder that sometimes the scariest part of meeting someone new isn't the unknown, it's how they treat you when things go wrong. I thought I was just going out for a casual drink with someone new, hoping for a chill night and maybe some laughs. But right from the second drink, things took a turn I didn't expect. Francesca seemed fine at first, normal enough, funny in a quiet way. But once a couple of drinks went down, it was like someone flipped a switch. Suddenly, she was unloading everything, her broken relationships, money problems, and family drama, all with way more detail than I ever signed up for. It felt less like a date and more like a therapy session where I wasn't sure I wanted to be the patient or the counselor. We met at this little dive bar that looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. The kind of place with sticky tables, neon signs buzzing overhead, and a bartender who gave off the vibe that she didn't care about anything beyond the next tip. At first, we were just talking about small stuff, things like music and movies, the usual first date fillers. I was trying to keep it light, but Francesca's mood started shifting after the second round of drinks. The way she talked changed. It wasn't casual anymore. It was heavy, like she was dragging all this weight around and finally decided to drop it on me. That's when the floodgates opened. She started talking about her ex who left her for someone else, how her last job screwed her over, and then it spiraled into her family drama, the kind that felt like it belonged in a soap opera. Her voice got quieter but sharper, like she was trying to hurt me with her words, but also trying to protect herself at the same time. The stories came out in chunks, as if she was trying to test if I could handle it, or maybe just hoping I wouldn't run. She was really detailed: names, dates, the exact money she owed, fights with her sister, everything. I didn't say much, just nodded, trying to show I was listening without letting on how overwhelmed I was starting to feel. And then came the questions. It weren't the normal first date questions about hobbies or favorite movies. Instead, it was stuff like, what would you do if you were me? And can you help me out? It felt like she was putting all of her problems on me, making me responsible for her mess. The bar noise faded into the background, and all I could hear were her words. I wasn't sure if this was some kind of test or if she really thought I had the answers. But I didn't, and honestly, I wanted out. I wanted to just walk away and pretend this night never happened, but I felt stuck, like if I tried to leave, I'd be the bad guy. The weirdest part was how she kept going, pouring more and more of her life onto me like she was desperate for someone to fix things. But this wasn't a conversation. It was a one-sided rant where I was the audience and her problems were the main act. It was exhausting. My head started spinning, and the room felt like it was closing in. But she didn't notice. She just kept talking, waiting for me to respond with some kind of solution or sympathy that I didn't have. It was like she was using me to unload all her pain and hoping I'd step up and save her. I glanced around, hoping someone would come and save me from this nightmare, but the bar was mostly empty except for a couple of late-night drinkers. The bartender was wiping down the counter without a care, and Francesca was still going strong. At some point, I stopped trying to make eye contact, hoping to disappear into my phone or the shadows. But she caught me looking away and just smiled, this weird kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. It made me realize this was less about connection and more about control. She wanted me there, stuck in her storm, whether I liked it or not. Every time I thought maybe she was done, she'd start up again, throwing more details my way. There was no break, no pause to catch my breath. She talked about money she owed to people I'd never heard of, fights with her parents over stuff I didn't understand, and how she felt completely alone even when surrounded by people. It wasn't the kind of stuff you expect on a first date, not this raw and this intense. I felt drained just listening, and I was worried if I said the wrong thing, it'd blow up in my face. The hours crawled by, and the drinks kept coming, though I wasn't sure if I was drinking to keep up or just to numb the awkwardness. Francesca's stories were like this never-ending storm cloud of hovering over us. She asked me again what I would do if I were in her shoes, like she was daring me to answer and then judge me based on my response. When I tried to change the subject, she'd bring it back around, pushing me to offer help I didn't have. The whole time, I felt like a trapped animal wanting to escape but stuck in a situation that was already out of my hands. Eventually, I figured out the best way to get out was to pretend I was interested and just let her talk herself out. I stopped trying to respond and just nodded along, hoping she'd eventually run out of steam. After what felt like forever, she finally slowed down, but the damage was done. The night I thought would be simple turned into this exhausting, confusing mess where I realized sometimes people don't want a date. They want an emotional dumping ground, and you're just the unlucky person stuck in the middle. Walking out of that bar felt like waking up from a bad dream. I couldn't believe how quickly things had turned. It wasn't like she was evil or anything, just overwhelmed and maybe not thinking about how much she was unloading on someone who barely knew her. But still, I felt shaken, like I had been caught in something way bigger than me and didn't have the tools to handle it. I haven't heard from Francesca since, and honestly, I don't know if I ever want to. That night left a mark, one that I didn't see coming but won't forget anytime soon. So yeah, if you ever think a date can't go wrong just over a few drinks, think again. Sometimes the stories people carry aren't just backstory. They're a storm waiting to break right when you least expect it. I never thought a simple swipe right would land me in something this weird. I was just scrolling through dating apps one lazy Saturday, half joking with my friends about how the guys on there all seemed either too young or way too intense. That's when Damon popped up, said he was 50, single, and just looking for someone to talk to. Honestly, just looking for someone to talk to things seemed kind of sweet, even if it came with a warning label. I figured, whatever, maybe he's just lonely and a bit awkward. No harm in grabbing coffee, right? That's how it started, totally casual. We agreed to meet at this little coffee shop tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, one of those spots that smell like fresh pastries and old books. It wasn't my usual scene, but it felt like a chill place where nothing crazy could happen. I walked in and spotted Damon right away. He was older than I expected, but not just by a few years. There was something about him that screamed different era. His clothes looked like they'd been pulled straight from some early 90s fashion catalog, and he had this awkward way of holding himself that made me feel instantly on edge. Still, I sat down because I figured I'd give the guy a chance. At first, the conversation was slow but harmless. Damon talked about his job, which sounded like he was somewhere stuck in middle management forever, and how he'd been feeling isolated lately. He kept mentioning how lonely he was, like he was trying to convince me more than anything else. I was trying to be polite, throwing in questions, nodding along, but there was this weird tension building underneath it all. Damon wasn't just sad. He was desperate, and that desperation made everything feel off. The place was pretty quiet except for the usual coffee shop chatter and some soft music in the background. I noticed how Damon's eyes didn't really look at me, but seemed to dart around like he was always searching for something just out of reach. He kept glancing at the door like he was expecting someone else, or maybe waiting for an escape. That weird feeling didn't go away, no matter how many sips of coffee I took. Then he started talking about how he'd been alone for so long that it was messing with his head. Not the kind of I'm lonely, let's cuddle talk, but more like a raw, desperate confession that felt way too intense for a first date. He went on about how no one understood him, how people his age were already settled or married, and how he felt left behind by the world. I could see the pain behind the words, but it was more suffocating than sad, like being trapped in a room that kept closing in. As the conversation dragged on, Damon started asking really personal questions, but not in a getting to know you way. It was like he was trying to figure out if I'd stick around no matter what. He wanted to know about my family, if I had anyone to rely on, and even what I thought about people who get lonely. I tried to dodge some of it, but he'd circle back like a shark, not letting anything drop. The whole thing felt less like a date and more like a strange interview where the stakes kept getting higher. At some point, I realized he wasn't just lonely, he was obsessed with the idea of being saved. Like I was supposed to be the person to pull him out of whatever hole he'd fallen into. And that's when the vibe shifted into something seriously uncomfortable. Damon's eyes got darker, his smile more forced, like he was masking something deeper and not entirely good. I tried to keep my tone light, hoping to steer the chat away from these heavy shadows, but it felt like trying to hold back a flood with my bare hands. The coffee shop started to feel smaller, like the walls were inching closer, squeezing the air out of the room. Damon leaned in and started telling me about his past relationships, how they ended, why he blamed himself, and how he didn't want to be alone anymore. It was like I was sitting across from someone who had been carrying a mountain on their back for decades, and now he was trying to put it all on me. I couldn't tell if he wanted comfort or control, but either way I felt myself shrinking. That's when things got even weirder. Damon started to talk about how loneliness changes people, how it eats at you until you don't know who you are anymore. He hinted that some nights were worse than others and that he'd done things he wasn't proud of just to feel something. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a normal date conversation. This was a person unraveling right in front of me, dragging me into the mess. I glanced at my phone, thinking about excuses, but I couldn't figure out a way to get out without making it awkward or dangerous. The whole time, Damon kept bringing the talk back to how he didn't want to be alone, how he was tired of pretending he was okay. It was like he was confessing to a stranger, hoping for a miracle or maybe just some kind of lifeline. But the more he talked, the more I felt trapped, like I was supposed to fix something I didn't understand. And the date was less about connection and more about survival. Eventually, I told myself I needed to wrap things up. Damon looked disappointed but said something that made my skin crawl. He mentioned how hard it was to find someone willing to listen, someone who wouldn't run when the darkness showed. That line stuck with me as I walked out of the coffee shop and into the cold night air. I felt shaken, like I'd stepped into a story I wasn't prepared for. I never heard from Damon again. Part of me wanted to forget the whole thing, pretend it never happened. But every time I think back, I remember how his loneliness wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper, darker, and impossible to ignore. It wasn't a date gone wrong in the usual way. It was a glimpse into a place I never wanted to visit, a reminder that sometimes loneliness can look like a storm you don't see coming until it's too late. Swiping right seemed harmless that day, but that night taught me that some people bring storms with them, even if they say they're just looking for someone to talk to. I'd never thought a simple coffee date could turn into one of the most uncomfortable nights of my life. I met Ariana through a mutual friend, and at first, she seemed chill, funny, sharp, someone you'd want to hang out with. So when she asked me out for drinks, I figured why not? Nothing fancy, just a casual evening at this cozy bar with some retro vibes. The kind of place with dim lights, old records playing, and booths that make you lean in close. Perfect for a first date, or so I thought. From the moment we sat down, Ariana started talking about stuff that caught me off guard. She wasn't just making small talk. She launched straight into this whole thing about how men need to be way more careful about who they date, just like women have to be. At first, it sounded like she was just betting about dating apps or bad experiences, but then it got intense. She kept going on about false accusations, how easy it is nowadays for someone to ruin a guy's life with just words, and how men should protect themselves before even thinking about trusting anyone. I tried to keep up, but the vibe was shifting fast. She wasn't angry, not really, more like this cold, calculating kind of serious, like she was on a mission to make me see the real dangers out there. And honestly, it made me feel kind of uneasy. It wasn't the usual dating talk. It felt like she was warning me about something I hadn't thought about before, but in a way that put me on edge. Like the whole night wasn't about us getting to know each other, but some kind of weird interrogation where I was the one under the microscope. The bar was pretty empty except for a few late night regulars nursing their drinks, and the music was low enough that you could hear each other without yelling. But every time Ariana brought up those points, I found myself shrinking in my seat, unsure where this was going. She painted these pictures of men getting blamed for things they didn't do, losing their jobs, their reputations, even their freedom. She said women had learned to be cautious to protect themselves, but guys just kind of wandered into danger without a clue. It was like she wanted me to feel vulnerable, like the world was full of traps just waiting to snap. I kept nodding, trying to seem interested or at least respectful, but inside, I was starting to get nervous. There was this weird tension hanging over the table, like I was suddenly on trial for something I didn't even know I was accused of. The more she talked, the less I felt like I was on a date and more like I was being lectured or tested. She even hinted that some women might take advantage of men who don't watch their backs, that trusting the wrong person could ruin your life overnight. As the drinks flowed, the conversation got heavier. Ariana shared stories, some real, some maybe exaggerated, about guys she knew got caught up in drama they didn't see coming. She wasn't subtle about it. The way she talked, it was clear she believed men deserved to be wary, almost like she expected me to confess that I hadn't been careful enough before. I couldn't tell if she was trying to protect me or just wanted me to admit that men had it easy until things went wrong. At one point, she leaned in and asked me what I thought about all this. I froze. I wanted to say something light, something normal, but the whole night had drained any confidence I'd had. Instead, I just shrugged and said something vague, hoping she'd drop it. But she didn't. She kept pushing, pressing me to admit that dating was dangerous for guys too, that I'd have to change how I approached relationships if I wanted to stay safe. By then, I was more uncomfortable than I'd ever been on a first date. The cozy bar felt like a trap, the dim lighting turning harsh in my mind. I started noticing little things, how she watched my face when I responded like she was analyzing every twitch and blink, how she kept steering the talk back to the dangers men faced like she was on some mission to break me down or make me paranoid. I wanted to laugh it off, joke about how dating was awkward for everyone, but I couldn't. Something about her tone made me think she wasn't messing around. I tried to change the subject a couple of times, mentioning music or travel, anything to lighten the mood, but Ariana always circled back to the same topic. It was like she had a checklist, and I was failing every item. The more I talked, the more I felt like I was losing ground, like the night was less about fun and more about survival. I started wondering if she did this to every guy she met, setting them up to fail so she could say, "See, you're not careful enough." After what felt like hours, but was probably only 90 minutes, I finally found a moment to excuse myself to the bathroom. Standing in that cramped, flickering light, I caught my reflection and realized how tense I looked. My heart was racing, and I wasn't even sure why. When I came back, Ariana was scrolling on her phone, texting like nothing was wrong. The coldness had settled over the table, and I knew the night was almost over. I paid for my drinks, said thanks, and left before she could start in again. Walking out into the cool night air, I felt this weird mix of relief and confusion. What was that? Why did it feel like I'd been put through some weird mental workout instead of just going on a date? I kept thinking about her warnings, the paranoia she tried to plant in my head. It wasn't just a casual chat anymore. It was something else. A subtle way to control, to twist the story so I'd feel like the one at risk. I never texted her back. Something about that night stuck with me, like a bad aftertaste you can't swallow. It wasn't just that she made me uncomfortable. It was how she turned a simple date into a place where I questioned everything about who I was supposed to be. She said men needed to be careful, but the way she said it felt less like advice and more like a weapon pointed right at me. And honestly, that's the last thing I expected from a girl named Ariana on a Friday night at some low bar downtown. Sometimes I wonder if she really believed all the stuff she said or if it was just a game to see how I'd react. Either way, it left me feeling like I'd walked into something darker than a first date, like I was sitting in a room with someone who wasn't looking for a connection but trying to trap me in her own kind of fear. That's not what I signed up for, and I don't think I ever want to go back there again. I thought I was going on a normal first date with this girl named Xavier. The kind of casual meetup where you grab some food, chat a bit, and see if there's any spark. We met at this quirky little cafe with mismatched chairs and walls covered in old movie posters. The kind of place where you expect real conversations and maybe a laugh or two. But the whole night ended up feeling like a weird game I didn't know I was playing. Like every time she said something about herself, it was like hitting rewind and hearing a totally different story the next minute. I couldn't tell if she was messing with me or if I'd accidentally stepped into some bizarre alternate reality. From the start, things didn't line up. She told me she worked as a graphic designer, which sounded cool, but then a few minutes later she said she was actually studying to be a nurse. I figured maybe she was juggling both, so I didn't press. But then the hometown story started. First, she said she grew up in a small beach town up north. Then, when I mentioned I'd been to the coast recently, she acted like she'd never seen the ocean. Later, she talked about living in some Midwestern city she supposedly hated, but a couple of sentences after, she described the exact same place like it was paradise. It was like every detail kept shifting, and I was scrambling to catch up. I kept wondering if I missed something or if maybe she was super private, not wanting to share too much. But the more she talked, the more it felt like none of it added up. When I asked about her hobbies, one minute she was into rock climbing and hiking, and suddenly she admitted she hated the outdoors and preferred video games. I swear, by the end of the night, I wasn't sure if I was talking to one person or several different versions of the same person, hopping from story to story. The whole cafe vibe didn't help either. The lights were flickering a bit, and the music was this low hum of indie songs that made everything feel kind of surreal. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this calm, unreadable expression, like she was watching how I was processing the chaos. I couldn't tell if she expected me to call her out or if this was her way of seeing how much I'd stick around despite all the weirdness. It wasn't just the big stuff either. Small details kept flipping too. Her favorite food changed like a mood swing from sushi to burgers to vegan stuff and back. She mentioned a brother who was a year older, then later said she was an only child. The stories were so tangled that by the time I tried to get a straight answer on anything, I felt I was chasing ghosts. At one point, I thought maybe this was some kind of weird test or prank. Like, maybe she was gauging if I get frustrated or called her out. I stayed quiet, half because I was confused and half because I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. Instead, I just nodded along and tried to keep the conversation going, hoping for some anchor in the madness. As the night dragged on, I noticed my own head spinning. The more she talked, the less I knew. It was like the person sitting across from me was a moving target, always slipping just out of reach. I started checking my phone more often, pretending to look busy, trying to figure out if I should bail or keep trying to decode whatever this was. The real kicker came when she started talking about her job again. One minute, she was an artist working freelance. The next, she was in some tech startup. Then she mentioned a charity she volunteered on weekends. None of these things lined up timeline-wise, and when I tried piecing it all together, it felt like none of it could possibly be true. I kept asking myself, was she lying? Was she hiding something huge? Or was her life just this messy, fragmented story she couldn't keep straight herself? It wasn't the usual, oh, I forgot where I said I worked kind of slip up. It was like the whole identity was made of shifting sands. I'd never actually asked her directly if she was telling the truth. It felt wrong somehow, like the conversation had turned into a weird trap. I was stuck trying to figure out if I was dealing with someone unstable or someone purposely spinning a web. Either way, it wasn't a date anymore. It was a puzzle with missing pieces and no real solution. By the end of the night, I just wanted out. I paid my share, said my goodbyes, and left with this gnawing feeling that I had been part of something strange. I didn't even know what to text her afterward because I didn't want to sound crazy or like I didn't believe a word she said. So I just didn't say anything at all. Walking back to my place, I kept replaying the night, trying to make sense of it. Was this just a weird one-off? Or had I just met someone who wasn't who they said they were? I still don't know, and honestly, I'm glad I never found out. Some stories don't need endings, especially when the middle is already unsettling enough. I thought it was just going to be a chill, normal first date. Grab a coffee or maybe hit a casual bar. Talk of it, see if there's a vibe. But this one? Man, it felt like stepping into a whole other universe where the clock was running way too fast. I was the only one stuck in slow motion. The girl's name was Abby, and from the second we said goodbye, things started feeling less like a date and more like a job interview I didn't ask for. We met at this little cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of town, the kind with soft lighting and vinyl records playing in the background. Abby was easy to talk to, seemed genuine, laughing at my jokes, sharing stories about her life. I was thinking, okay, cool, maybe this is something that could actually work. But right after I walked her to her car, things went sideways. Suddenly my phone buzzed nonstop. Abby started texting like she was already planning the next 10 years of our relationship before the first night was even done. At first, it was simple stuff. Like, when can I see you again? I figured, all right, maybe she's just excited. I didn't want to be rude, so I gave a vague answer, hoping to play it cool. But it didn't stop there. The messages kept coming, and they got more intense. Abby wasn't just asking when we could hang out next. She wanted to know when I'd meet her friends, meet her family, maybe, and move things forward to something serious. Like, all of it right now, immediately. It felt like I was being pulled into this fast lane with no brakes. Usually when you're getting to know someone, there's this natural pacing. You talk, maybe hang out a couple times, get comfortable. But Abby acted like we were already a couple who had been dating for months. I was supposed to keep up or risk losing her. The pressure was insane, like she was setting a timeline and I was the one expected to follow it without question. She texted about her best friend, how important it was that I met her soon, because friends are family, and if I really liked Abby, I'd want to know the people who mattered most to her. Then came messages about her little brother and her parents, like I was expected to fit into this whole world overnight. And all this on top of the usual, when can I see you again? Texts every couple of hours. It wasn't cute or sweet, it was exhausting. The weird part was she never outright said I had to commit right away, but every message was loaded with this intense vibe like it was the obvious next step. Like if I hesitated or said I needed time, I'd be disappointing her or worse, making her doubt me. The pressure wasn't loud or aggressive, it was subtle, like a thick fog settling in and closing all the doors I usually keep open on a first date. I started dodging the messages or giving vague replies, but Abby didn't back off. She'd double text, sometimes even triple text. And when I didn't reply fast enough, she'd send little things that felt almost like warnings about how important trust and honesty were, how she wasn't someone who'd wait around forever, how she hoped I wasn't playing games. I never felt so on edge about a person I barely knew. One night, I finally told her I needed a break, that it felt like things were moving way too fast for me. The response wasn't what I expected. Instead of backing off, Abby started sending these long messages explaining how rare it was to find someone who actually got her, how she wasn't just rushing. She was serious, and if I wanted to be part of her life, I had to meet the people who mattered most soon. Like she was trapped in her own reality, dragging me along whether I wanted to or not. It got to the point where I was scared to leave my phone alone because every time I glanced at it, there was a new message from her. The constant buzzing made it feel like I was being watched, monitored. I wasn't just dating Abby anymore. I was caught in some kind of emotional trap where boundaries didn't exist and my feelings didn't matter. All that mattered was keeping up with her pace, and honestly, I didn't know how to do that. I remember one weekend she sent a message saying she was inviting me to a family dinner that Friday like it was totally normal, and I had no choice but to say yes. There was no room for a let me think about it or I'm not ready. The way it was written made it feel like saying no wasn't an option. I never told her no directly, but I ignored the message, hoping she'd back off. She didn't. Instead, Abby called. A lot. Each time it felt more like an interrogation than a friendly check-in. She wanted to know why I wasn't answering, why I was pulling away. I tried to explain that I just needed space, that this was too much too soon. She said I was overthinking it, that she was just trying to be honest and upfront, but it felt like honesty was just another word for pressure. I started canceling plans with friends because I was so overwhelmed by the constant contact. I felt guilty for needing time alone, like I was letting her down or proving I wasn't serious. The whole thing wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't a date, it was a trap with no clear exit. I wasn't even sure if Abby realized how intense she was being or if she just thought that was normal. One night, after ignoring her calls all day, she showed up outside my apartment. I didn't answer the door, but just seeing her there was enough to make me freeze. The fact she knew where I lived felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to handle. The next day, the messages came flooding in again, this time with pictures of her standing nearby and little notes about how much she cared and wanted to see me again soon. It felt less like affection and more like possession, like she was trying to own a part of my life before I even knew who she really was. The pressure didn't slow down, it just got heavier like a storm cloud hanging over my every move. In the end, I had to cut it off completely. No texts, no calls, no explanations, just silence. Even now, I get that uneasy feeling remembering how fast things spiraled and how someone could turn what was supposed to be fun and casual into something so overwhelming. I never thought a first date could turn into a nightmare where the other person expected you to jump into their entire world without even knowing your name properly. And if you ever find yourself on a date that feels like a sprint instead of a stroll, trust that gut feeling. Because sometimes the biggest red flag isn't what someone says on the first date. It's what they don't say but show in how they push you to move faster than you're ready for. I was honestly kind of excited about this one. Lewis seemed like a solid guy online, funny in a low-key way, smart, and not one of those guys who made everything about themselves. His messages were easy, there was a quiet confidence to him, and I thought maybe, just maybe, this could actually be something real. We agreed to meet at this little diner downtown, a classic spot with neon signs buzzing overhead and vinyl booths that felt like stepping back in time. It was the kind of place where you could talk without a million distractions. I figured the atmosphere would help break the ice. When Louis showed up, he looked perfectly normal. Nothing off about the way he smiled or shook my hand. He was casual but neat. Jeans, a simple shirt, nothing flashy. I tried to focus on that first impression, the one that made me feel like maybe this date was going to go well. But almost immediately after we sat down, something started to feel off. His phone was glued to his hand like a lifeline. And I don't mean the quick, polite glance most people sneak during conversations. No, Lewis was swiping, scrolling, typing, checking it obsessively every few seconds. I tried to ignore it at first, hoping he was just nervous or distracted by something important. I asked him about his job, his hobbies, anything to get him talking. But it was like I was speaking into a void. His eyes flicked up briefly before darting right back to that glowing screen. At first, I thought maybe he was shy or socially awkward. Maybe he just wasn't great at first dates. But the more the minutes passed, the clearer it became that it was more of a background noise, an afterthought while his phone sucked up his attention. I couldn't help but notice how his thumbs moved with practiced ease, how his expression changed when he read a message, how distant he was despite sitting just across from me. I tried to stay engaged, leaning in, smiling, asking questions, but each time I caught him mid-scroll, my smile faltered. It was like he was physically there but mentally somewhere else, like our whole date was a side event to whatever drama or distraction his phone held. The diner itself was cozy but loud enough that his constant phone tapping became a kind of drumbeat in the background, pounding through what should have been a relaxed evening. The neon lights buzzed overhead, casting an unnatural glow on the table and his face, emphasizing how detached he seemed. I kept wondering if he even wanted to be there, or if he was just going through the motions because it was easier than saying no. When the waiter brought the check, I thought maybe that would be a natural moment to connect or at least reset the mood. But Louis barely looked up. He made some excuse about his wallet being somewhere else, and I ended up paying. Honestly, I didn't mind. Sometimes you cover for someone else on a first date and just hope they'll make it up later. But then the silence after the date hit me like a wall. No texts. No, thanks for a nice evening. No, let's do this again. Nothing. I waited, trying not to obsess over it, but after a day, then two, then a week, it became clear. I was completely ghosted. I reached out once or twice with simple messages, nothing demanding, just, hey, how's your week going? Or good meeting you the other night. Radio silence. It was like my messages vanished into a black hole, unread or deliberately ignored. That silence was its own kind of awful. It messed with my head. Did I say something wrong? Was the whole day a mistake? Or worse, had I been played? The answer came in a way I hadn't expected. A friend mentioned casually that Louis was dating multiple people at the same time. 5, maybe more. It was like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the pieces started falling into place. The constant phone checking, the lack of engagement, the cold silence afterward. It wasn't nerves or distraction. It was disinterest masked by distraction. I was just one option among many, a backup plan that never deserved more than half his attention. That realization hurt in a way I didn't anticipate. It wasn't just about being ghosted. It was about understanding that I was never really there in his mind to begin with. I was the invisible maybe, the side note to whatever else was happening on his screen. It made me question what moments on that date were real. Did he laugh at my jokes because he found them funny, or just to be polite? Did he ever actually want to talk to me, or was I just filling time until something better came along? Looking back, I can see the clues I missed. The way he never asked me any real questions, how he seemed distracted no matter what I said, how there was no talk about a next date or plans beyond that night. But when you're caught up in the moment, you want to believe someone's just having an off day or is shy. You don't want to jump to the worst conclusion until it smacks you in the face. The diner still has those buzzing neon signs, the same worn vinyl booths, the same crackling old records playing on a loop. Every time I walk past, I remember sitting there with him, feeling more alone than I ever had on a date. It's wild how a place can be so familiar yet filled with a memory that makes it feel completely different. In the end, I deleted his number and blocked him on every app I could find. I didn't want to see his name pop up anymore or wonder if he was out there doing the same thing to someone else, pretending to care while never really showing up. I guess that's the worst kind of ghost story. Not the supernatural kind, but the kind where the person you thought was there never really was. That was Louis, a guy who showed up, acted like he was somewhere else the entire time, and then vanished like I never mattered. Sometimes the scariest dates aren't about what happens. They're about realizing you were never really part of the story at all. You ever get that gut feeling right before you meet someone, like something's off, but you can't tell why? That's how it started with Ella. I wasn't expecting much, just another random swipe on a dating app, something casual, maybe a decent conversation. She seemed cool enough from her pictures, and yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I thought my job and the way I dressed might catch her attention. I mean, who wouldn't want to date someone who can actually afford to take them out somewhere nice? But from the second we sat down, I realized this was nothing like any date I'd been on before. We picked this little wine bar tucked away in a quiet part of town, the kind of place with dim lighting and cozy booths that usually make you feel like you're the only two people in the world. At first, Ella seemed normal, smiling, chatting, ordering a fancy cocktail like she knew her stuff. But then, out of nowhere, she dropped this bomb that hit me like a slap. She straight up told me I was ugly. No joke, like it was some fact she just had to get off her chest. And the worst part, she said she only agreed to go out with me because I looked like I had money. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out if I heard her right. I mean, yeah, I get it. First impressions matter. But who just says that to someone's face? And not just once. But she kept circling back to it, like it was this little game or something. It wasn't playful or joking either. It was cold and real. The kind of thing that punches the air out of you and leaves you trying not to break right there in the middle of the place. I thought maybe I misunderstood her. Maybe she was trying to be sarcastic or some weird kind of humor, but no. Every time I tried to steer the conversation somewhere normal or positive, she'd snap it back to how she didn't really think I was attractive but figured I could still be useful. She glanced at my watch, my phone, the car I parked out front, like ticking off reasons why I was worth her time, even though I didn't measure up to her looks checklist. It was the kind of vibe where you want to just walk out, but you're trapped in this booth with someone who's basically doing their best to tear you down while still expecting you to pay for the drinks. And honestly, that's what made it worse. She was leaning into this whole, I'm so honest and brutal thing, acting like it was some badge of honor to insult me while pretending to keep things casual. I kept telling myself maybe she was just messing with me. Maybe there was some weird game I didn't get, but deep down it felt like I was a project or a challenge, like I was a punchline in some twisted joke she was playing. I don't know what she expected me to do, laugh it off, agree. I just wanted to disappear, but I was stuck. The whole night was this weird mix of feeling invisible and painfully visible at the same time. She talked about herself like she was this queen bee judging the world and everyone around her, while I was just some pawn who showed up because I apparently fit some dollar sign stereotype. And every once in a while, she dropped those comments that cut sharper than the wine glass in my hand. She said stuff about how she wasn't shallow, but then spent half the night breaking me down and making it clear looks mattered more to her than anything else. I tried to find some way to make it end without making a scene, like paying the bill and slipping out quietly, but she acted like I owed her for even showing up. Like I was lucky to be there, even though she made me feel like I didn't belong. The whole thing was messed up in a way that didn't make sense until it was too late. When I finally got out of there, I felt drained. Not just physically tired, but mentally wiped. It's wild how one person can make you feel so small in a room full of strangers. I walked back to my car and sat there for a minute trying to shake off the weight of what just happened. The fact that someone could be so upfront about using you, about deciding your worth by what's in your bank account and not who you are, left this cold pit in my stomach. Looking back, I realized I should have listened to that gut feeling when I first met her. But you want to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? You want to believe maybe she's having a bad day, or maybe there's more to her than just the harsh things she said. But there wasn't. That night was her in full, someone who didn't care about anything real, only what she could get from you. And that was the real horror, not some ghost story or creepy moment, but the way someone could just strip you down like you're nothing, all while pretending it's just how the world works. A date that started with a little hope and ended with me wondering how someone could be that blunt, that cold, and so openly calculating all in one night. It's not the kind of story I tell often, but sometimes you just need to get it out. Because not every date is just awkward or funny. Some of them are just straight up disturbing, and this one definitely was. So here's the thing about first dates. You never really know what you're walking into. You get that mix of nerves and excitement, maybe some hope too, and you picture this normal, maybe a little awkward night where you just get to know someone. But the date I went on with Ben, that night was anything but normal. It started with a surprise that threw me off so hard I barely knew what to think. I'd met Ben online, and honestly, his profile was different in a good way. He was confident and creative, and his pictures had this vibe that made me think he'd be fun to hang out with. When I agreed to meet him, I didn't expect him to show up wearing makeup and a dress. Like I knew people have their own style and all. But this wasn't just some casual thing. It was full-on, carefully done makeup, the kind you see in a magazine, and a dress that was way more than just trendy. It wasn't the usual date look. I was instantly curious, but also kind of confused about what kind of date this was going to be. We met at this quirky little cafe with exposed brick walls and old jazz records spinning in the background. It felt like the kind of place where you expect to meet someone artsy, but what came next was way beyond what I'd imagined. Ben was super charming, had a voice that was calm and steady, and he talked about his life in the city like he was this mysterious artist type. But then, as the conversation went on, things started to feel off. At first, it was small things like how he kept adjusting the hem of his dress or fussing with his makeup in the reflection of his phone. Not a big deal on its own, but combined with the way he kept staring around like he was waiting for someone else or something to happen. I thought maybe he was just nervous, but it was a different kind of nervous. There was this weird tension that didn't match the vibe of a casual date. Then the topic shifted to his past relationships, and that's when the real creepiness started. Ben didn't just talk about his exes or breakups like you'd expect. He described them in a way that was almost clinical, like he was analyzing them as experiments that didn't work out. His stories were full of contradictions, too, jumping from sweet memories to cold, almost angry rants about how people had betrayed him or misunderstood his lifestyle. It felt like he was trying to get me on his side, but also warning me not to mess up. The worst part was how quickly he moved from talking about relationships to asking if I ever felt like I was living a double life, like hiding who I really was. It was weird because I wasn't even sure what he meant by that. He hinted that he wasn't just into dating people like me, and that there were parts of his world I wouldn't understand unless I was ready to see the truth. That line stuck with me all night, and it made my skin crawl more than the makeup or the dress. Throughout the date, Ben kept bringing up this idea that the world was fake, full of masks, and that only a few people really knew what was going on beneath the surface. He said stuff about secrets and power, and how most people were just puppets. I was half laughing, half seriously wondering if he was messing with me or if this was some kind of weird role play. But it wasn't playful. His eyes got darker as he talked, like he actually believed what he was saying, and I felt like I was trapped in some kind of surreal nightmare. Then came the part that really messed me up. When the cafe started to close, instead of leaving or saying goodnight, Ben suggested we go somewhere else, somewhere more private, so he could show me what he really was. I didn't know what to say, but I was already feeling on edge, and his suggestion didn't help. I wanted out, but there was something about the way he said it, like he was waiting for me to either say yes or admit I wasn't brave enough. We ended up walking through the dark streets nearby, and the city felt different at night, quieter but somehow more dangerous. Ben kept talking about how most people were scared of real truth and preferred their little comfortable lies. I tried to steer the conversation back to normal stuff, but it was like he wasn't listening, or maybe he didn't want to. His dress swished as we walked, and I noticed people looking at us, some curious, some amused, and I felt exposed like I was caught in something bigger than me. Finally, at some sketchy-looking alley, Ben stopped and said that this was where the masks come off. I didn't want to stick around, but he grabbed my arm, not hard, but enough to make me freeze. I looked at him, and in the streetlight, his face was calm but serious, like he was about to reveal some dark secret or make me part of whatever weird world he was living in. That's when I realized I didn't just feel uncomfortable, I felt scared. Not because of some monster or ghost, but because of how real Ben's obsession with this secret world felt. He wasn't just wearing a dress for style or shock value. He was trying to pull me into a place where reality didn't make sense, where trust was a joke, and where people like me were just pawns. I didn't wait around to find out more. I yanked my arm free and started walking fast, heart pounding, head spinning from everything I'd just seen and heard. The city lights blurred as I made my way back to the busier streets, and I didn't look back until I was safe inside the subway station. That night stuck with me because it wasn't just a date that went wrong. It was a glimpse into something dark and twisted that you don't expect to find in a normal person. Ben wasn't just different in how he dressed or presented himself. He was carrying around a whole world that made me feel small and lost, like I had stumbled into a nightmare dressed up as a casual night out. The makeup and the dress were shocking at first, but what really disturbed me was the vibe behind it. The way Ben's eyes and words made me feel like I was part of a game I never signed up for. It's the kind of date you don't forget, not because it was fun or wild, but because it peeled back a layer you didn't want to see. And trust me, some things are better left hidden.